Namaste, I'm Nandini Nitin. Any festival brings along with it the excitement of meeting grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins, followed by a delicious feast. What tops the list for me is sitting around our elders listening to stories related to these festivals. Given the pandemic, I'm definitely missing that now. Story. The word itself lights you up, be it of a princess, an old man, or a cute pup, be it of something that happened yesterday or 1,000 years ago, be it of compassion or valor, one is drawn into its flow. I shall now narrate a story from times ancient, when a tiny bird showed as much determination as the gallant. Before I begin, I must share that there is a twist to my storytelling. Literally, because I'll be depicting the story through dance and mudras, that is hand gestures, which I'm sure you will understand easily. However, there are certain typical mudras. For instance, in this story, I'll be referring to 5 men, the Pandavas, and 100 men, the Kauravas. Then there is Krishna, wearing a crown with a peacock feather. And no, I'll not demonstrate any more right now. I would rather like you to try and figure it out on your own first. So here's the deal. At the end of the story, I shall demonstrate most of the typical mudras, and you can check how many you guessed right. So let's begin. It was that time when the great war of Mahabharata had been declared between the Kauravas and Pandavas. Each was assembling large troops of allies from all over Bharatavarsha. The battlefield of Kurukshetra was to accommodate armies with massive cavalries, that is, soldiers riding on war elephants and on horseback. Hence, to facilitate their movement, trees were being felled by elephants to clear the ground. On one such tree lived a sparrow in a nest with her 4 chicks that were too young to fly. As this tree was knocked down, the sparrow's nest fell onto the ground. Miraculously, the mother and chicks were unharmed. However, a nest on the ground meant utter danger. The frightened sparrow looked around for help. Just then she saw Krishna and Arjuna surveying the battlefield. They were planning their strategies before the war. The sparrow flapped her tiny wings with all her might to reach Krishna's chariot. Drawing his attention with her frantic chirping, she pleaded with Krishna to save her children, who would otherwise be crushed the day the battle began. Krishna heard her, but calmly replied that he couldn't interfere with what was destined to happen. The sparrow pleaded that all she knew was that he was the Lord, her Savior, and that her children's fate rested only in his hands. To save them or not was his choice. Responding like an ordinary man, Krishna repeated that there was nothing he could do about it. After all, the wheel of time moved on its own discretion. To which the sparrow innocently replied that she didn't know anything about time and its discretion. For her, he was the powerful one who could do anything he wished. With devotion, she surrendered her fate to him. At that point, Krishna smiled at the bird and simply advised her to stock food for 3 weeks in her nest. Unaware of this conversation, Arjuna was trying to shoo away the sparrow, which fluttered her wings a few times in obeisance to Krishna and flew back to her nest to quickly start stocking up food. 2 days later, the army of the Kauravas and the Pandavas stood in their war gear facing each other. The mighty acclaimed warriors were on chariots. Some soldiers were on elephants and horses, but most were on foot, waiting to charge. The animals were also suitably decked in grand armors, with huge bells strung around the necks of the elephants. Just before the conch was blown to commence the battle, Krishna asked Arjuna for his bow and an arrow. Arjuna was startled because Krishna had vowed not to lift any weapon in the war. Besides, Arjuna believed that he was the best archer out there. He asked Krishna to assign the task to him, as nothing was impenetrable for his arrows. Nonetheless, Krishna quietly took the bow from Arjuna and aimed at an elephant. The arrow hit the bell around its neck, dropping it to the ground, instead of bringing the animal down. Arjuna couldn't contain his chuckle, seeing that Krishna had missed an easy mark. He also offered to shoot the target. Ignoring his reaction, Krishna gave him back the bow and said that no further action was necessary. This left Arjuna puzzled, as the elephant was unhurt and alive. Only the bell was gone. Responding to Arjuna's questioning look, Krishna simply said that it was the same elephant that had knocked down the tree sheltering the sparrow's nest. From puzzled, Arjuna went to being thoroughly confused, for he didn't remember the insignificant little sparrow. Nevertheless, Krishna dismissed further conversation and instructed him to blow the conch. With that began the war. It was one of the most fierce battles in the history of India. Numerous lives were lost over the next 18 days. And in the end, the Pandavas stood victorious. Soon after, Krishna took Arjuna with him on his chariot, navigating through the battleground that was laden with bodies. The field was littered with lifeless horses and elephants. Krishna stopped at a certain spot and looked down thoughtfully at an elephant bell. He asked Arjuna to lift the bell and put it aside. The instruction, though simple, made little sense to Arjuna, After all, in the vast field where plenty of other things needed clearing, why would Krishna ask him to move an insignificant piece of metal out of the way? Krishna repeated the instruction, stating that it was the same bell that had come off the elephant's neck when his arrow had struck. Well, without another question, Arjuna bent down to move the heavy bell. As soon as he lifted it, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 young birds flew out one after another, followed by the sparrow. The mother bird swirled in circles around Krishna, expressing joy and gratitude. The one bell that Krishna had struck 18 days ago had protected the entire family. Arjuna stood dumbstruck. Seeing Krishna behave like an ordinary human being, he had forgotten who Krishna really was. In the setting of an epic war, Lord Krishna had listened to the request of a tiny bird and had helped it in an unpretentious manner. He, on the other hand, had literally flaunted his archery skills and had even mocked the Lord. Arjuna immediately went down on his knees with folded hands and apologized to Krishna. I have a feel-good takeaway from this story. During this Mahabharata-like war against the pandemic, we have all been worried and busy caring for our family and ourselves. At the same time, many of us have also helped the less fortunate, just like Krishna helped the sparrow. For instance, my 11-year-old daughter has been sharing her study materials and toys with the children of my house help and others like her. We share what we have been blessed with. Anyway, getting back to those typical mudras, this is used to show enemy or war with the enemy. A tree, elephant, tusk of the elephant, a horse, riding a horse, riding a chariot. Then we have bow and arrow, aiming an arrow, striking of an arrow. A simple representation of the bell which is tied, which snapped. Then we have the spear and shankha or conch when it is held to the left and chakra to the right. This represents Lord Vishnu. So, how many did you get right? I'm sure most, if not all. I would love to know what is your takeaway from the story. So please share that in the comments section. I will be back with yet another tale with a twist. Until then, namaste.